Chapter 7. Truth and Historical Action. The critical question, what is truth, is basic to every culture and civilization. Every civilization rests on an answer, explicit or implicit, to the question of truth, and every culture is a conception of truth externalized. The life of a culture is its truth, and it prospers or falls in terms of the nature of that faith. At the end of every age, when the foundations of a civilization are decaying and disappearing, the question of truth ceases to be an academic exercise and becomes a problem for survival. Various ideas of truth compete to command the future. Every idea becomes a live option in the marketplace of survival, but not every idea is a promise of survival. In order to understand the conflicting concepts of truth, it is necessary to cite and distinguish the major contenders for man's mind and future. First, a prominent force in history has been the concept of truth as formulated by rationalism, both in the East and in the West. In this perspective, truth is an idea, an ideal, the form or the reality of being. The influence of the concept on Asian history has been very great, although it is best known for its Hellenic formulation and subsequent history. Depending upon the particular variation of this rationalism, the result is a downgrading and contempt for a particular segment of reality. In Plato's Republic, the truth is the idea of the total state and man's unity therein. Individuality or particularity belong to the world of matter and are thus lesser in significance. They only find themselves as they are subject to the truth, the totalitarian order of Plato's dream. In contrast, when spirit as the truth is pitted against matter, the consequence of this rationalism is mysticism and asceticism. The untrue world of matter or illusion must be transcended for the true world of spirit or form. In another form, rationalism explains the truth or form of being as a changing, developing process. Eric Voegelin, in Order and History, 3 volumes, speaks of the periodic leaps in being. Each, quote, leap in being, end quote, is an unfolding of the new and developing, and also changing the course of being. Voegelin's position is thus ultimate relativism. The next, quote, leap in being, end quote, can be a reversal of present-day truth, so that God is in a sense present only in the victorious movements of history. That Voegelin has been hailed by some National Review writers as a great conservative is an excellent indication of the intellectual bankruptcy of these scholars. Other variations of rationalism exist. Its influences on the political left and right are many. One notable quote-unquote conservative exponent of rationalism of a Neoplatonic form was Richard M. Weaver, author of Ideas Have Consequences, The Ethics of Rhetoric, and Visions of Order. In every form, however, rationalism, because it overtaxes and over-evaluates reason, is destructive of reason. The observation often made by Cornelius Van Til that rationalism always ends in irrationalism describes a fact abundantly in evidence in the history of thought. A second approach to truth is that of Edmund Burke's followers. It rests in great measure on a concept which appears in one of Burke's most famous passages. Quote, society is indeed a contract. Subordinate contracts for objects of mere occasional interest may be dissolved at pleasure, but the state ought not to be considered as nothing better than a partnership agreement in a trade of pepper and coffee, calico or tobacco, or some such other low concern, to be taken up for a little temporary interest and to be dissolved by the fancy of the parties. It is to be looked on with other reverence, because it is not a partnership in things subservient only to the gross animal existence of a temporary and perishable nature. It is a partnership in all science, a partnership in all art, a partnership in every virtue and in all perfection. As the ends of such a partnership cannot be obtained in many generations, it becomes a partnership not only between those who are living, but between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are to be born. Each contract of each particular state is but a clause in the general primeval contract of eternal society, linking the lower with the higher natures, connecting the visible and invisible world, according to a fixed compact sanctioned by the inviolable oath which holds all physical and all moral natures, each in their appointed place. This law is not subject to the will of those who, by an obligation above them, and infinitely superior, are bound to submit their will to that law. The municipal corporations of that universal kingdom are not morally at liberty, at their pleasure, and on their speculations of a contingent improvement, wholly to separate and tear asunder the bands of their subordinate community, and to dissolve it into an unsocial, uncivil, unconnected chaos of elementary principles. It is the first and supreme necessity, only a necessity that is not chosen, but chooses, a necessity paramount to deliberation that admits no discussion and demands no evidence, which alone can justify a resort to anarchy. This necessity is no exception to the rule, because this necessity itself is a part too of that moral and physical disposition of things to which man must be obedient by consent or force. But if that which is only submission to necessity should be made the object of choice, the law is broken. Nature is disobeyed, and the rebellious are outlawed, cast forth and exiled from this world of reason and order and peace and virtue and fruitful penitence into the antagonistic world of madness, discord, vice, confusion, and unavailing sorrow." End quote. It is important to note, however, that while Burke emphasized the significance of tradition and continuity for political health, he subordinated all things to the authority and truth of God, as he told his electors on November the 3rd, 1774, quote, "Certainly, gentlemen, it ought to be the happiness and glory of a representative to live in the strictest union, the closest correspondence, and the most unreserved communication with his constituents. Their wishes ought to have great weight with him, their opinions high respect, their business unremitted attention. It is his duty to sacrifice his repose, his pleasure, his satisfaction to theirs, and above all, ever and in all cases, to prefer their interest to his own. But his unbiased opinion, the mature judgment, his enlightened conscience, he ought not to sacrifice to you, to any man, or to any set of men living. These he does not derive from your pleasure, no, nor from the law and the constitution. They are a trust from Providence, for the abuse of which he is deeply answerable. Your representative owes you not his industry only, but his judgment, and he betrays instead of serving you if he sacrifices it to your opinion." End quote. Hallowell has well summarized the weaknesses of Burke's position, and with charity, quote, "Undoubtedly Burke placed greater reliance upon the redemptive power of history as such than history can or does warrant. He conceived of God as a kind of divine immanence working in history for the redemption of mankind, but he neglected the conception of God as a transcendent being confronting each one of us here and now. The Church he conceived more in terms of its utility as a social institution than as a divine institution for the mediation of grace." It was not Burke's intention, however, to develop either a systematic political philosophy or a theology. His ideas were formulated in response to specific political events in the heat of battle and in his role as statesman. If he transcended the role of statesman to utter some truth of timeless quality, we may be grateful that, however unsystematic as a thinker, he combined the talents of a politician with the wisdom of a philosopher, and that was as rare a combination in his day as it is in ours." End quote. Burke's perspective was political, not philosophical. His contemporary academic followers too often take the purely political and exalt it into a philosophical premise. In the hands of Kirk, the pragmatic and political necessity and reality of continuity and tradition, and a respect for it become, quote, "the principle of continuity," end quote, a basic premise of thought. Kirk writes, quote, "Burke then spoke with the authority of a profound and practical intellect, not merely with the enthusiasm of an unaccomplished rhetorician, when he described the great primeval contract of eternal society. And I believe that our modern blindness to the reality of this contract and to the sobriety of Burke's phrases has mightily impeded any alleviation of our present discontents, our maladies of spirit and of body politic. What Burke illuminates here is the necessity to any high and just civilization of a conscious belief in the value of continuity in religious and ethical conviction, continuity in literature and schooling, continuity in political and economic affairs, continuity in the physical fabric of life. I think we have neglected the principle of continuity to our present grave peril, so that with us, as Aristophanes said of his own generation, quote, "Whirl is king, having overthrown Zeus," end quote. Men who do not look backward to their ancestors, Burke remarks elsewhere, will not look forward to their posterity. If we retain any degree of concern for the future of our race, we need urgently to re-examine the idea of an eternal contract that joins the dead, the living, and those yet unborn. Even if we have lost most of that solicitude for posterity, still we may need to return to the principle of continuity out of simple anxiety for self-preservation." End quote. In a talk at Pepperdine College, Kirk discussed Christianity as an aspect of Western tradition, and the foundation of civilization was for him tradition and continuity. This, for Kirk, is the essence of truth, continuity. His application of Burke's concept is rigid in a way that Burke's was not. Burke retained as basic to tradition, however much he weakened that foundation, the absolute and sovereign God. For Kirk, this God is apparently totally a part of tradition and continuity. Burke favoured the American colonists in the War of Independence. Kirk has made it clear that he would have been a Tory. Kirk has joined the Roman Catholic Church, but his writings give no evidence of either a scholastic or Augustinian philosophy. He is still a believer in continuity and tradition. Is his quote-unquote conversion to Rome simply an adoption of a powerful tradition? In terms of his perspective, Kirk would not only have been a Tory in 1776, he would, if he were in the USSR in 1966, be an old-line Stalinist, and in 8020 who would have, in the name of the, quote, principle of continuity, end quote, joined the Sanhedrin in crucifying Christ, who openly denounced tradition in the name of truth. A deadly use of Burkean continuity was made by Harold O. Rugg, the educator, whose textbooks eloquently portrayed the American tradition as radicalism, as a long resistance to federalism and constitutionalism in the name of social democracy. Rugg could point to American development in the 20th century as evidence that the true tradition and vital continuity is on the left, so that Kirk's Tory faith is a hothouse plant by comparison. Truth as continuity and tradition as roots is a deadly concept. What if man's roots be cannibalism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, or animism? Is he obligated to remain in that tradition and to receive new insights only in terms of his brand of, quote, the great primeval contract of eternal society, end quote? This philosophy has all the fertility of a mule, and its social dynamics reach from the professor's podium to the second row of seats. It is a great faith for little men. A third concept of truth, one widely prevalent, is the concept of truth as factuality. This faith has been very succinctly stated by Lenny Bruce, quote, truth is what is, end quote. In terms of this faith, everything which exists or occurs in nature is thereby both natural and is the truth concerning reality. The thinking of Kinsey rested on this premise. For him, any form of sexual activity, whether homosexuality, animal contacts, or anything else, was equally normal and true as heterosexual marital relations because it was equally, quote-unquote, natural, that is, existent in nature. Truth as factuality is a concept with a long history, and it has been associated with cynicism, nihilism, anarchism and with socialism. It is closely linked with the student radicalism of the 1960s. In every age, its function is negative and destructive. It acts as a corrosive and hostile force against civilization, but is itself totally sterile and incapable of any act of reconstruction. Because truth is everything except that which is exclusive, this faith, apart from destroying law and order, simply accepts the status quo of evil. This is its ultimate implication and always its immediate purpose, even when unacknowledged. A fourth concept of truth is a pragmatic approach, one in which truth is seen as beyond good and evil and beyond the normal sense of contradiction between truth and untruth. Friedrich Nietzsche stated this position more clearly and honestly than many of his followers. Quote, "The falseness of an opinion is not for us any objection to it. It is here, perhaps, that our new language sounds most strangely. The question is, how far an opinion is life-furthering, life-preserving, perhaps species-rearing, and we are fundamentally inclined to maintain that the fastest opinions, to which the synthetic judgments a priori belong, are the most indispensable to us, that without a recognition of logical fictions, without a comparison of reality with the purely imagined world of the absolute and immutable, without a constant counterfeiting of the world by means of numbers, man could not live, that the renunciation of false opinions would be a renunciation of life, a negation of life. To recognize untruth as a condition of life, that is certainly to impugn the traditional ideas of value in a dangerous manner, and a philosophy which ventures to do so has thereby alone placed itself beyond good and evil." Levy has aptly described Nietzsche's position as, quote, "at least in part the assertion of a will to illusion," end quote. The Freudian Otto Rank stated that, quote, "with the truth one cannot live. To be able to live, one needs illusions," end quote. This will to illusion has been formalized into a variety of philosophies: pragmatism, instrumentalism, existentialism, logical analysis, and others. These philosophies reduce truth to what works, to the successful illusion, to the powerful lie. Neo-orthodoxy shows very clearly the influences of this position. By placing truth beyond good and evil, beyond normal standards of truth and untruth, this philosophy in actuality denies the validity of truth as truth and substitutes for it, as its mainspring and foundational principle, power. The world of politics is for adherents to this doctrine the real world, because it is for them the world of power, their only truth. As against all these and other positions, a fifth position is that of biblical Christianity. Truth is a person, Jesus Christ, the second person of the Trinity, and truth is his infallible and inscriptured word. Jesus declared, quote, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me," end quote, John 14:6. Since, quote, "all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made," end quote, John 1:3. All things are only truly understandable in terms of him and his creative purpose. The true interpretation of reality is possible only in terms of the Triune God, of whom Jesus Christ is the declaration or exegesis. John 1:18, "He hath declared him," or exegesto, "has made known." Apart from him, the universe quickly falls apart, in human thought, into a world of illusion or brute factuality, with every fact unrelated to all others. The denial of the Triune God is ultimately the denial of meaning, community, nature, family, life, culture, and of all things, and the collapse of man's existence into hell, total unrelatedness and meaninglessness. Only by left-handed and partial affirmations of God's eternal decree have cultures apart from Christianity been able to exist. The growing epistemological self-consciousness of man is increasingly pushing for a total war against God, and therefore against culture and civilization. Jesus Christ, by his hostility to the tradition of the rabbis, came as the destroyer of tradition and continuity in the name of truth. As the Logos, he came as the destroyer of autonomous reason, of rationalism, in the name and as the visible incarnation of true wisdom. Because the ontological Trinity is the creator of all things, the Trinity has priority in all categories of thought, for there can be no law, society, justice, structure, design, or meaning apart from God. The denial of God is the denial of truth, life, relationships, values, society, science, art, and all things else. The nihilistic and anarchistic course of man as he denies the Triune God is an inescapable consequence of man's departure from God. The ground of historical action is the governing conception of truth for an era or group, and as man turns his back on the truth, Jesus Christ, his historical action is increasingly nihilistic and anarchistic.